he did not die quickly. The once mighty king thrashes on his bed, eyes wild with terror. Something is eating him alive. Tiny creatures swarm under his skin, feasting on his flesh from the inside out. The stench of decay fills the room as his own body rots while he still lives, and even his loyal soldiers recoil in horror. This is the agonizing end of a tyrant, a man quite literally consumed by his own corruption. It is the mid-2nd century BCE. Alexander's old empire has fractured into kingdoms, and Antiochus IV rules one of the largest, the Seleucid realm spanning Syria, Mesopotamia, and beyond. At first glance, Antiochus appears every bit the grand Hellenistic monarch, patron of Greek arts, flamboyant in display, even eccentric. But beneath the pageantry lies a ruthless autocrat. Antiochus is determined to cement his power and spread Greek ways, even by force. Nowhere is this more brutal than in Judea, a restive province with its own ancient faith. In Jerusalem, Antiochus interferes in the temple, the holiest site of the Jews. He ousts the high priest and installs his own puppet. When rumors of his death spark a Jewish uprising, Antiochus's fury is unbound. He marches on Jerusalem like a man possessed. The holy city is taken by storm. What follows is mass slaughter. For 3 days, his soldiers butcher everyone in sight, young and old, women and infants. Streets run red with blood. Ancient records say tens of thousands are killed in the massacre, and just as many dragged off in chains. The temple itself is desecrated. Antiochus has a pig slaughtered on the sacred altar, splattering its blood across the sanctuary. He erects a statue of the Greek god Zeus within the temple walls, a final insult to the local religion, and by royal decree, he outlaws the Jewish faith. Observance of traditions like circumcision or Sabbath becomes a capital crime. The punishments are merciless. If a mother circumcises her infant son in defiance of Antiochus, she is murdered and her child hung around her neck. Scrolls of scripture are burned. Some who refuse the king's commands are subjected to unthinkable tortures. In one notorious instance, 7 brothers and their mother are arrested for clinging to their beliefs. Antiochus personally oversees their torment. One by one, the young men are flayed and dismembered alive. A hot iron pan is heated until it glows. Antiochus orders the first brother's tongue torn out, his hands and feet lopped off, and then, as his family watches, the mutilated youth is fried to death in the pan. The next brother is scalped and dismembered in turn, their mother forced to witness each death. Antiochus's methods are monstrous, designed to terrorize anyone who might defy him. Each scream, each gruesome execution cements his legacy of cruelty. Yet rather than pacify his subjects, these atrocities ignite rebellion. In the Judean hills, a band of fighters led by Judas Maccabeus rises in revolt, vowing to cleanse their land of the tyrant's evils. Antiochus, however, is occupied on another front. He is campaigning in the eastern provinces of his empire, seeking tribute and glory. Reports reach him that the Jewish rebels have defeated his generals in battle and reclaimed Jerusalem's temple. They have smashed the idol of Zeus and purified the altar he defiled. The rebels even established an independent rule in parts of Judea. Antiochus's grand plan to unify his empire through terror is starting to backfire. Enraged and humiliated, he makes a fateful decision. He will personally avenge this insult. Gathering his forces, the king swears to reduce Jerusalem to ashes and exterminate its people for defying him. Antiochus's hubris has reached its peak. He believes himself invincible, a living god wronged by mortals. In his mind, the rebellion in Judea is not just treason, it is blasphemy against him, the self-proclaimed divine monarch. As he marches eastward from Persia back toward Judea, Antiochus commits one more sacrilege. Passing through the Persian city of Elymais, he learns of a wealthy temple filled with gold and sacred treasures. Greedy for funds and confident in his might, Antiochus attempts to plunder the temple of its riches. But this time, he fails. The local people rise up and drive him off, defending their shrine. Antiochus is shocked and humiliated. Twice now in Persia and Judea, mere subjects have defied the will of God manifest. Seething with anger, he lets loose a brazen threat. "When I reach Jerusalem, I will turn it into a mass grave for the Jews." This is the moment many later observers would point to as his ultimate crime of pride. By boasting he will annihilate an entire people and desecrate their holy city, Antiochus sets himself against the very gods, against the God of Israel in particular. Ancient chronicles describe a cosmic turning point. Having pushed cruelty and arrogance to its absolute extreme, King Antiochus is about to face judgment. Not in a human court, no mortal power can hold him accountable, but in a higher court of fate or divine retribution. The proud king does not know it, but his trial has begun, and the sentence of doom is about to be carried out on his very flesh. Antiochus drives forward in a rage, whip-cracking his chariot horses to race toward Judea and crush the revolt. He will show the world what becomes of those who oppose him. But then it happens. The first blow of his punishment strikes without warning. Antiochus suddenly doubles over with a scream, clutching his belly. A sharp pain knifes through his intestines as if he's been run through by an invisible sword. He gasps and convulses, sweat pouring down his face. For a moment, the king is stunned. This agony has no visible source. He, who tortured so many others, now feels a mysterious torture inside himself. But Antiochus Epiphanes is nothing if not stubborn. Gritting his teeth, he refuses to stop. He snarls at his charioteer to drive faster, determined to outrun the pain and reach Jerusalem. But that was just the beginning. The chariot hurtles along the rough road at breakneck speed. Antiochus, weakened and feverish, clings to the railing. The horses gallop heedlessly until suddenly the wheel strikes a rut or stone. With a sickening lurch, the chariot flips. Antiochus is thrown into the air like a rag doll. He lands hard on the ground with a crack of bone. The mighty king lies crumpled in the dust, his limbs twisted unnaturally. His guards rush to help, lifting their ruler's bruised and broken body. Antiochus groans. He can barely move. The fall has shattered his strength in an instant. Now he must be carried on a litter. The man who rode in triumph, now hauled like injured cargo. Yet even this will not be the end of his torment. The worst was still to come. As the caravan makes camp in the mountains far from home, Antiochus's condition deteriorates rapidly. The pain in his gut intensifies, a searing fire that will not abate. He develops a raging fever. Delirious with agony, the king's rage finally falters. In lucid moments, he feels panic. Something is terribly wrong inside him. Then the true horror reveals itself. His attendants notice strange boils breaking out across the king's body, oozing foul fluid. Antiochus's skin begins to darken and rot in patches. He awakens to a ghastly sensation of movement under his flesh. To his utter revulsion, worms and lice start to crawl out of his sores. Tiny pale worms, born inside his decaying tissues, wriggle out of his ulcerated abdomen and drop onto the ground. Lice swarm in his hair and beard, biting and burrowing. Antiochus Epiphanes, the man who fancied himself a god, is being eaten alive by vermin. His flesh sloughs off in chunks from his body, wet and putrid. The stench of decay gathers like a cloud around him, a smell so appalling that soldiers gag and flee the royal tent. This once proud king, who commanded worship and awe, now stinks so badly that none can come near without covering their noses. Servants assigned to tend him retch or beg to leave the duty. No one can bear the odor of death in life that clings to Antiochus as his body literally rots while he still breathes. The mighty ruler who thought he could touch the stars is now an object of filth and disgust, abandoned by his own due to the unbearable corruption of his flesh. And yet, he lives on in this misery, lingering for days. Every hour is torment. Antiochus's nerves burn with pain as the worms gnaw unchecked. He can feel them inside his belly, crawling, multiplying. He screams, but no relief comes. The king's arrogance finally breaks under the weight of suffering. In fevered anguish, he begins to acknowledge what he has done. Fragments of his victims' faces flash before him. The mother weeping for her butchered sons, the innocents slaughtered in Jerusalem, the defiled altars. Terror and guilt seize Antiochus's heart. He becomes convinced that he is cursed by the God of the very people he tormented. No human enemy has done this to him. This is the wrath of heaven. In a cracked, sobbing voice, Antiochus begs for mercy. He calls out prayers to the God of Israel, the deity he once mocked. Between spasms of pain, he promises to undo his evils. He will free Jerusalem, rebuild the temple he defiled, shower its people with gifts. He even swears to renounce his divine pretensions and become a Jew himself, if only the plague eating him alive will stop. But no relief comes. The unseen judge has no pity on the tyrant. The rotten parasites continue their feast. Antiochus's beautiful royal robes are now nothing but soiled rags hanging off a corpse-like frame. His skin is gray, marbled with gangrene. Breathing becomes a labor, each breath rattling in his chest. The final blow is not a sword or a spear, but an overpowering wave of pain and nausea. After days of unimaginable suffering, Antiochus Epiphanes finally expires, his body broken and devoured by the vilest of creatures. The executioner was not man or beast, but his own flesh turned to decay. The king who made the world tremble dies whimpering, eaten alive by lice and worms in the mountains far from his kingdom. When word of Antiochus's death spread, reactions were divided. His soldiers, who once viewed him as indomitable, were shaken by the sight of their king reduced to a maggot-ridden husk, convinced his torment was no ordinary illness, but a punishment from the gods. The stench and horror of his death left a mark none could forget. Meanwhile, in Judea, his fall was greeted with grim satisfaction. The Maccabean rebels saw it as divine vindication, cleansing and rededicating the temple in triumph, an event still remembered as Hanukkah. Antiochus had tried to destroy their faith, but instead weakened his dynasty and lost control of the very land he sought to subdue. Beyond Judea, his grotesque end became a lasting warning. Writers compared him to later tyrants who also died in rotting agony, seeing in his death a cosmic verdict against hubris. Antiochus had mocked burial rites, threatened to feed his victims to beasts, and ruled through terror. Yet he himself died without honor, consumed by worms and abandoned in shame. His fate echoed through history as a grim deterrent. This is what awaits those who crown themselves gods and revel in cruelty, whether by divine punishment or poetic justice. The agonizing fate of Antiochus Epiphanes confronts us with the timeless clash between tyranny, justice, and courage. A king who believed himself untouchable, who spilled innocent blood and mocked the divine, was in the end consumed by his own body, a living nightmare that mirrored the horrors he inflicted. His downfall feels like poetic justice, a verdict of the universe reminding us that unchecked cruelty carries the seeds of its own destruction. Yet his story also raises haunting questions. What if the rebellion had failed, or fate had spared him? The martyrs who resisted him chose defiance even at the cost of torture and death, their courage a stark contrast to his hubris. In the end, Antiochus's grotesque death became both warning and validation, proof that power and pride rot from within, and a challenge for us to ask ourselves: in the face of injustice, would we stand firm or bow to survive? Thank you for watching this dark journey through history. How does this story make you feel? Does the fate of Antiochus Epiphanes strike you as deserved karma or something even more frightening? I'd love to hear your thoughts and feelings in the comments. Remember, truth can be stranger and more gruesome than fiction. If you thought this was horrifying, wait until you hear about the man who was pounded while he was still alive. That tale will test your stomach and your sense of justice even further. Stay tuned for the next brutal chapter in our journey through history's darkest moments. And until then, stay curious and stay safe.